Before our speakers begin, I'd like to note a few logistics. All attendees are currently in listen-only mode. Following our speakers' remarks, we will open the webinar up to questions. Throughout the presentation, please type your question into the chat box, which we will work to address during the Q&A period. Finally, this webinar is being recorded, and we will send a link to registrants after the webinar. Now, I'd like to introduce our first speaker. Mary Shoemaker is the lead author of ACEEE's new report on locally driven energy efficiency workforce development. She is responsible for a mix of research, analysis, and outreach on energy efficiency opportunities in the United States. Mary conducts research on state and local energy efficiency policies and programs. She co-authored several ACEEE state and city scorecards and is helping to coordinate the build-out of ACEEE's research and outreach on energy efficiency in rural communities. Mary also conducts and tracks ACEEE's technical assistance on state energy efficiency efforts. I'd now like to turn it over to Mary Shoemaker, who will run through some of the key findings of our new report through the local government lens, developing the energy efficiency workforce.
Hi, everyone. Thanks again for joining us today. Sorry for the technical issues. There's a lot of research out there from ACEEE and others on how to design energy efficiency policies and programs. There's also quite a bit of research estimating the number of efficiency jobs that exist across the country. There's a lack of information, however, about how cities can actually support this workforce. During today's webinar, we're going to run through a few strategies that cities can use, and we're going to hear from a few cities that have actually started doing this work themselves. And I'd like to just add one reminder to please mute yourself if you are not currently presenting. Thank you. So before discussing our new report, I wanted to quickly run through our three guest panelists. To start, we'll hear from Veronica Soto, Program Director at Emerald Cities, Los Angeles, who will speak to equity and workforce development. Then we'll hear from Camille Pollan, Energy Efficiency Program Manager at the City of New Orleans Office of Resilience and Sustainability, who will speak to the city's multiple efficiency workforce development programs. To wrap things up, we'll hear from Adam Jacobs, Energy Manager at the City of Boston, who will tell us about their building operator course with their local utility. I'll give a more detailed introduction of each speaker before they kick things off. And I'd like to note as well that Dave Ribeiro, Senior Researcher at ACEEE and co-author on this report, will join us later in the webinar during the Q&A session. So to start, I thought it might be helpful if we got a better understanding of the size and variety of the energy efficiency workforce. It's pretty big, and it spans quite a few different types of jobs. Across the country, there are over 2 million energy efficiency jobs that exist in many traditional industries. Earlier this year, the National Association of State Energy Officials, or NASEO, and the Energy Futures Initiative, EFI, and the BW Research Partnerships released an updated workforce data set for the energy industry, including energy efficiency jobs. As you can see with this pie chart, which ACEEE recreated using data from this report, most energy efficiency jobs occur in the construction industry. And the second largest slice of the pie is professional and business services, followed by manufacturing, wholesale trade and distribution, and transportation, or transport, excuse me. So the energy efficiency workforce is projected to grow 9% over the course of 2018, but it does face several challenges, a couple of which I'll dive into here. The first is that energy efficiency businesses report that they are concerned they won't be able to find young, qualified workers to replace older workers who are retiring from the field. Another challenge is that the energy efficiency workforce is less diverse in terms of gender and race than the national workforce. However, these challenges present an opportunity for cities to influence the growth of this industry so that it happens in a way to strengthen communities and make the workforce more inclusive. So now I'd like to pivot to some of the findings from our recent report that came out last month through the local government lens, developing the energy efficiency workforce. To collect information for this report, we reviewed existing literature on the topic, and we conducted interviews with about 26 experts, including 7 officials from city sustainability offices. I'll provide a brief overview of our findings before turning it over to our guest speakers. So local governments have quite a few options for supporting a robust energy efficiency workforce. This slide is kind of just an overview before I dive into a few of the specific strategies, but we wanted to distill it into two general buckets. First, cities can leverage existing workforce development efforts led by community members like nonprofits, utilities, or unions. Second, cities can lead by example by supporting and hiring diverse contractors to work on city-funded efficiency projects in both public buildings and in private buildings. I won't get too far into the weeds with each of these stakeholders, but I'd like to highlight how local governments can engage with just a couple of them. To start, cities can work with energy utilities to promote existing utility-administered efficiency training programs or utility-offered energy efficiency incentives. Cities can work with utilities as well to identify new training opportunities where they're needed, as we'll learn from Boston. Local governments can also harness the expertise of students in energy efficiency-related fields of study at local community colleges to deliver city-led energy efficiency programs. If you're interested in learning a bit more about other examples as to how cities can coordinate with each of these other stakeholders, I'd invite you to take a look at our report. Excuse me. All right, so now that we have kind of a bird's eye view of the local energy efficiency ecosystem, I'd like to run through a few of the strategies that we identified in our research. We grouped these strategies into four main categories, the first of which is workforce development goals. Quite a few cities establish energy efficiency or greenhouse gas reduction targets, as well as goals to create green jobs or support a particular number of job seekers across industries. Cities can align these goal setting and long-term planning processes and embed equity throughout. The second bucket depicted in this table includes training programs. Cities often offer incentives for local residents and businesses to help them save energy, and they can offer training alongside these programs to make sure that the local workforce is available to deliver them. We recognize that local governments do often have very limited resources, so another option would be to support existing training programs, for example, led by nonprofits and associations. The third bucket, depicted in the third row of this table, is job access strategies. I think what's important to note about this bucket is that it's not just about creating new jobs, but it's about ensuring existing jobs are available to individuals in all communities, including low-income households and including communities of color. This could encompass inclusive procurement activities, which I touched on earlier, but Veronica will describe in greater detail. The last bucket we have here is kind of a catch-all. As part of our research, we came across a few clean energy accelerators, hubs, and incubators which cities can work to support. A couple of examples of these include the Los Angeles Clean Tech Incubator, Powerhouse in Oakland, California, and Potential Energy DC. Lastly, cities should collaborate with efficiency employers, community-based organizations, and others who can really identify the highest impact workforce development pathways. So next up, I would like to turn it over to our first guest speaker, Veronica Soto. Veronica is the Program Director for Emerald Cities Collaborative Los Angeles. She has over 20 years of experience developing public agency economic and workforce development programs that promote diversity and economic inclusion. Her program works to increase the capacity and participation of small minority businesses, provide local workers with pre-apprenticeship training and career pathways for disadvantaged youth through science, technology, engineering, the arts, and mathematics, or STEAM education. One reminder to all participants, please feel free to enter your questions in the chat box at any point throughout these presentations, and we'll have a Q&A session at the end. Veronica, I'll let you take it away, and just let us know when you'd like us to advance your slides. Thanks.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon. Emerald Cities Collaborative, we're a national organization headquartered in Washington, D.C., and we're represented in 6 different cities across the nation, from New York all the way to California. And in California, we have a tremendous presence in Oakland, San Francisco, and Los Angeles. And so As we look at Emerald Cities, you know, I just need to share that for us, we want to be able to help create equitable, sustainable, resilient communities that focus on greening our cities, strengthening our democracy, and building our communities, specifically from the people from within. So as we go on to the next slide, I want to highlight some of the economic inclusion goals that really is the foundation of our work. We want to be able to address the demand created by projects and the supply, the workforce that impact infrastructure investment and the green economy. We also want to ensure that we expand access to high-wage careers and business opportunities through comprehensive alignment of workforce development resources and contract and procurement operations to benefit all stakeholders. Thirdly, to implement compliance systems and processes to ensure transparency, accountability, and validated public policy outcomes. As we move on to the next slide, one of the greatest examples, I think, of our efforts in this area is our work with the Southern California Regional Energy Network, where we focus on workforce education and training to cultivate a skilled workforce to support energy efficiency investment in the public sector that is reflective of the diverse and disadvantaged communities that it serves. Based on the growing innovation in technology and its application to energy efficiency and renewable energy use and storage, we begin our education and training with youth. Through our ACEEE Engineering Pathway Program, we provide high school youth from Los Angeles schools exposure to STEAM career pathways through concurrent enrollment in community college, stackable skill certificates, paid internships, and industry-recognized certificates that will prepare them for careers in the energy sector through design, programming, and construction. It is important to highlight that while girls in high school make up 3% participation in STEM, through ACEEE, we're currently at a third. So over 30% of our students are actually female. So we're also not just creating, race and ethnic diversity, but also gender diversity. As we move on to the next slide, we can look at the pathway to a union apprenticeship. And this is another critically important way in which we can ensure that high quality skills are developed to ensure that energy efficiency standards are achieved. And equally important is that we are able to provide disadvantaged individuals an opportunity to have a quality career with good wages and benefits. Pre-apprenticeship training programs are key to providing access to apprenticeship when also combined with supportive services that address employment barriers that are predominantly existent in disadvantaged communities. As we move on to the next slide, I also want to highlight the fact that our pathway and our pipeline continues on with small minority contractors. One of the things that we have done here in Los Angeles is create an e-contractor academy program that consists of 7 seminars, and we prepare small minority contractors to compete for energy efficiency projects. We also provide access to training and technical assistance to grow competitive capacity, and also provide contracting and procurement assistance to compete in the public sector. As we move on to the next slide, it provides a listing of the seminars that we believe have helped small minority and women-owned companies be able to participate and also navigate the public sector arena. So introduction to public contracting, which can also be overwhelming for small businesses, introduction to sustainability and energy, the process of bidding, estimating and scheduling, access to bonding and capital, which are tremendous barriers to small and minority-owned businesses, certification to provide them, in some cases, preference in the bidding process, safety training, which is important not just to provide safety, but to ensure that they're competitive, labor compliance, and also how to work under project labor agreements. In the LA market, most of our work is covered under a project labor agreement. So it's extremely important that small contractors understand how to navigate and how to adhere to labor standards incorporated into project labor agreements. LCP tracker compliance system training. Obviously, all work in the public sector is prevailing wage, so we want to make sure that our small contractors understand how to make the proper payments, the proper investments, and also pay the proper benefits and training plans that are necessary. Project management, cash flow management, and project closeout. The last 3 categories of training are extremely important. One thing is getting small contractors through the process of bidding and getting them a contract. The next thing is for them to actually successfully execute that contract while making money and being profitable. So that, and I would say it is our comprehensive pipeline, beginning with youth, cultivating the skilled workforce, and most importantly, also cultivating the capacity of entrepreneurs that exist in our diverse communities such as Los Angeles. And I believe the next slide is just our contact information.
All right, thank you so much, Veronica. I have compiled contact information for all presenters at the end of the webinar. Next up, I'd like to introduce Camille. Camille is the Energy Efficiency Program Manager for the City of New Orleans Office of Resilience and Sustainability. She works in partnership with public and private sector entities to create innovative, practical solutions that cut energy waste, support occupant energy management, and improve energy policies. Camille participates in the City Energy Project network of similar practitioners in cities across the country to support building energy efficiency policy. Her past work includes various professional and volunteer positions in support of building and rebuilding a more sustainable New Orleans, as well as disaster recovery work in post-tsunami Indonesia. She also taught English in the Peace Corps in Romania, so she's quite well-traveled. Camille, I'll hand it over to you.
Great, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak today. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can, thank you.
Fantastic. Okay, so we can just go to the first slide, and I can talk a little bit about what we do here in the Office of Resilience and Sustainability. This is a fairly new office within the city, and it was set up to support the resilience goals that this community helped set. And we also have climate action strategy goals that we developed that we're in the process of executing. So that's the larger picture of where we fit into the future of New Orleans sustainability. So drilling down into the energy efficiency jobs, I just wanted to mention that Louisiana has an estimated 25,000 energy efficiency jobs and 3,000 solar jobs. This is actually partially due to some of the state and federal programs that have provided the impetus for the growth of these industries in the past. So we benefited from that growth and are continuing to benefit from that. And one of the things that we're working on in the Office of Resilience and Sustainability is something called the Downtown NOLA Energy Challenge, and I have the web link there, and I can that'll be included in the presentation. What we're doing is we're inviting buildings in our downtown area, the large high-rises, to engage in a competition to lower their energy use, primarily by benchmarking and measuring their energy use. And there's a huge education component that we've rolled out in conjunction with that. So we're actually targeting building engineers, operators, managers, etc., for technical trainings, and we're rolling those out through 2018. And there are a lot of energy efficiency education and training programs for contractors that are in conjunction with that program that we administer in with support from our local utility, Entergy New Orleans Energy Efficiency Incentive Program, which is called Energy Smart, and I'll talk about that more in a moment. But there's quite a lot of coordination between our office and the efforts of our local utility in terms of training contractors and people who are on the ground working with making the buildings more energy efficient. We also have a Green Professional Operations and Maintenance course, which is called G-Pro, and that actually is modeled on the New York City curriculum that we've brought here to Louisiana for the first time, and it's how to operate a building efficiently and how to renovate and maintain the building through the operation of high efficiency implementation. And so we've actually partnered with local workforce development organizations such as the Urban League, and we are also working with the Actim staff, which administers the utility program, to communicate and send the outreach message to their network of contractors, as well as train their staff. And we're also training city staff on building operations. And so that's one of the ways that our office is directly involved in these efforts. Next slide, please. I also wanted to talk a little bit about what the city's Office of Supplier Diversity is doing. And we're working directly with MBE and WBE contractors, minority women-owned businesses, to identify them. And the City Council actually passed a goal of 35% of all of our publicly funded projects have to work with companies that are certified DBEs. And so we also have a public registry that has individuals that are certified as DBEs. So this creates a visibility for those industries and entities that want to have access to contracts that are at the city level. And in your ACEEE study that's referenced, and hopefully you'll have the link to that, they mentioned a 2017 study that the city conducted. And so we found within our city, we still have disparities, even 4 years after the passage of this ordinance, that there are still disparities in the utilization of minority and women-owned contractors, rates of business ownership, access to capital, etc. And so there are recommendations that we're working on implementing for expanding support for these firms through a local program. And that's actually being administered through the New Orleans Business Alliance, which is a quasi-governmental organization that is now focusing on workforce development with an eye towards DBE contractors, as well as providing them access to energy efficiency and sustainability industry jobs. And the Office of Supplier Diversity is also working with the USGBC, our Louisiana chapter, and our community college, which is Delgado. And there are various green economy initiatives that are through that effort that are actually identifying individuals that do not have high school diplomas and helping them to work on energy efficiency upgrades and actually hands-on projects on rebuilding projects and building projects. Next, please. And the last thing I wanted to talk about was the utility program that I mentioned. And this is Energy Smart is the name of our incentive program. It's administered by a company called Aptum. And as I mentioned, we work very closely in our office with the Aptum team to help them to conduct outreach and to do training and to grow our green workforce locally. So within Aptum, they have an implementation team. The contractors that work on the jobs are more than 50% minority owned and women owned or disadvantaged businesses. So they have a mission to really increase the supplier diversity. And they're working on providing the necessary experience to those companies to help them thrive in the energy efficiency sector. And they also partner with community groups to identify these companies and to help essentially incubate them and bring them into the pipeline of energy efficiency work that's available through the utility incentives. They're also working with the Greater New Orleans Housing Alliance, which is a multifamily and low-income housing advocacy group and community organization, to figure out how these benefits can extend to housing developers and ultimately low-income residents in the form of lowered utility bills and more affordable energy costs. And so there are a number of initiatives that Aptum is administering in the community in partnership with various organizations such as the Urban League that might not be eligible for themselves for supplier diversity certifications, but they actually are able to create opportunities by developing partnerships. And as I mentioned, they partner with our office, and that essentially benefits the utility as by helping them to administer their incentives, and it helps us to really develop a core group of contractors that have a solid background in energy efficiency projects, and we work together to expand that that stable of contractors by working in the community and continuing to find training opportunities to support them. And that's it.
Thanks so much, Camille. Next up, we'll hear from Adam in Boston's Department of Environment. Adam is the energy manager for the city of Boston, and through this job, he monitors the progress of the city's greenhouse gas emissions reduction activities and develops strategies to achieve the city's climate action goal to reduce emissions 25% below 2005 levels by 2020 and 80% by 2050. He works with the City of Boston stakeholders and municipal departments to ensure the accuracy, quality, and integrity of the data, analysis, and reports that are both entered into and generated by Boston's energy management system. He collaborates across city departments to ensure they understand reporting requirements, and he works closely with agencies to identify energy efficiency and water conservation projects. Adam, I'll let you take it away.
Sure, thanks. Good afternoon to everyone on the East Coast and good morning to everyone out west. I guess one update to that is that Boston is now targeting to be carbon neutral by 2050. So, you know, we've set the bar even higher for ourselves. So thanks. You can just go ahead and jump into the first slide here, because I think your intro basically covered things. What I first wanted to start with was just a quick intro to why energy conservation is such a a big business in Massachusetts as a whole, and it is due to a law that came through the Green Communities Act in 2008 that really prioritizes energy efficiency and demand side measures over supply side measures as far as meeting the needs for energy and capacity. These are some of the goals for the most recent 3-year plan that the utilities administer. And basically, this fund is created through ratepayer funds that are collected on every unit of energy purchased through Massachusetts. And essentially, the funds are aggregated and then administered through utility energy efficiency programs. And the whole takeaway here is that the cleanest kilowatt hour is going to be the one that you're not using in the first place. Renewables are great. Low carbon sources of energy are excellent, but if you can avoid using that energy in the first place, which is what this whole call is all about, you can get yourself a lot further, a lot more cost effectively. Next slide, please. So you're probably very familiar with energy efficiency programs to date. The MassSave program has been nationally recognized by ACEEE and a number of other entities for being a highly successful energy efficiency program. You obviously get the basics like your LED lighting, your high efficiency hot water and heating systems, your insulation, and then really, what I've spent a lot of time working on professionally is working with large commercial and industrial entities, and since I've come to the city, municipal entities, in trying to optimize large building operations. And what that ultimately looks like in today's day and age is, a very complex system. The Internet of Things has basically every piece of equipment in your building networked into a single control panel or a single, user interface. And like was mentioned earlier on in this presentation, the workforce that is operating a lot of these buildings is closer to retirement than to the beginning of their career. And anyone who does any survey about the building trades can tell you that there is there's a big gap coming soon in terms of the number of young people entering the field. So we've got a lot of people who did not grow up necessarily using computers and building controls and automation, and we're just adding more and more technology into these buildings. So, when we look at energy efficiency projects and the way that utilities prove these things out, a lot of it is based on the ability to save. But, there are numbers behind, ensuring those savings actually accrue and the persistence of savings. But I would argue that if you're going to invest in your buildings, it would be a very worthwhile endeavor to invest in your people first. So I quickly just want to jump into the next slide and explain some of what we've done here in Boston and where we plan on bringing this next. So next slide, please. Nope. There we go. You know, I did a pretty in-depth review of various training programs out there. There are a lot of great ones that are targeted for a number of different audiences. You have, you know, your certified energy manager that's looking at people who are design and engineering professionals. But one credential that really jumped out to me that I felt was very applicable to the population of people I tend to be working with, building facility managers, technicians, you know, your maintenance staff, was something that has been you know, generated out in the Pacific Northwest called Building Operator Certification. And it's a really intensive training in that it's 74 hours delivered over 8 days. And the class includes basically every piece of technology in your building that would consume energy, and it covers it from you know, a maintenance and operations you know, mindset. So it's not, you know, giving the, you know, the details on, you know, how you would install it. It's not looking at, you know, the CO2 reductions associated with it. It's really laser focused in on how you look at these systems, how they interact, and more importantly, you know, how it impacts an organization's bottom line. So we did this pilot program where we received utility rebates for the training from both our electric and gas distribution companies, because they are required by law to administer energy efficiency programs. And one thing that I found really beneficial, and we just finished this class up actually yesterday was the last training, so I'm fresh out of it, is at the end of every class, they conduct surveys and ask participants, you know, a number of questions. And one of the questions they ask is, how likely are you to invest in energy efficiency technologies in your building? And, you know, I work in the environment department. I work with a lot of folks in the budget office and the accounts payable office. And I can, you know, very firmly say that many people who work in operational roles don't usually see the utility bills. You know, they're not paying the bills. It's not a metric they've been necessarily trained to track and report on usually. And, you know, what we found from these surveys at the end of every class is that 80% of people said they're more likely to invest in these technologies. And I think it's really important to, you know, give credit to the folks who are making all of these investments in technology actually pan out and work, because you can invest in your building as much as you'd like, but if you know, don't actually achieve the savings, then that payback isn't going to come through. Your greenhouse gas reductions are not going to materialize. And really, it was a lot about empowering the staff who are working in the buildings now, so they understand how they can add value to the organization. And I think this is, you know, a really good way to, you know, ensure that there's sort of a common goal and a common understanding of, you know, what you're trying to accomplish in terms of energy efficiency within your organization. And we're really hoping that we can, you know, use this pilot to build on and then expand to, we have our own benchmarking ordinance here in Boston that requires almost 2,000 of the largest buildings in the city to report their annual energy usage. And we would love to have, you know, as many folks trained up as possible, because, you know, that's it's an important step that we need to take in meeting our climate and greenhouse gas reduction goals. And I think that's pretty much the end of my presentation, so we can take it from there.
Great, thanks so much, Adam. It's exciting to hear, you know, your classes are still underway, and it's exciting to hear that the results have been so positive. Well, thank you again to Veronica, Camille, and Adam for telling us a bit more about your activities. Now we will turn to the Q&A portion of the webinar. We've received a few questions through the chat box, but please feel free to keep them coming. I'll start with a couple of clarifying questions. This one is for Veronica. Does the LA program cover private contracting as well as public contracting?
Under the Southern California REN, it's focused on the MUSH sector and also on multifamily housing. The multifamily housing is privately owned.
Great, thanks, Veronica. One other clarifying question for Camille. Is the certification list for MBE and WBE contractors maintained by the state or the city or some other entity?
That's a good question. It's actually maintained by the city. and it's applicable for the city of New Orleans boundaries only.
Great, thanks for clarifying. So then one other question for both Camille and Veronica. We're wondering if you could maybe further explain how you went about building partnerships with community colleges or some of the other key stakeholders that you mentioned. It seems like both of you work with such a variety of organizations and agencies and companies in your communities. What have you found to be most important in building those relationships? I'll let either one of you start.
Camille, you want to start?
Sure. Okay, sure, I can go. This is Camille in New Orleans. I was just telling someone fairly recently that New Orleans is a very small town, and the energy efficiency industry is even smaller. So a lot of the players know each other. So if somebody jumps to a new organization or an educational institution or around into the public sector, we often hear about it within our circle and start to reach out naturally. And a lot of these relationships are personal, and we start there. So, you know, that's kind of how a lot of these things get jump-started, to be honest, in New Orleans.
Well, Los Angeles is very large. Obviously we have, because of its size, you have a lot of different pockets, and I would even say sub-regions within Los Angeles. So what we did when we kicked off the Southern California Regional Energy Network program, we went ahead and established a workforce development advisory committee, which was consisted of labor. So we had the unions involved. We had all the community-based pre-apprenticeship training programs, the utilities, the work source centers, which are the WIOA, funded organizations that provide supportive services to disadvantaged and underemployed individuals, community-based organizations that focused on environmental justice, social justice, organizations and other agencies. We had the transit agency, the largest school district, Los Angeles Unified School District, the LA Community College District. So we had representatives from the entire district itself, but also the independent colleges. And so we brought everyone together to really focus on how we, as an entire ecosystem, were going to not only identify individuals and put them on this pathway, but how are we going to address the barriers that disadvantaged communities and disadvantaged individuals face, whether it be transportation, individuals that have a previous incarceration record, individuals that are single custodial parents. So we really focused on bringing in the resources to address them. And so through this process of bringing everybody together, we realized that there was a lot of fragmentation, that a lot of the organizations were working in silos. And so what we did as a result of this advisory committee is that we ended up developing the local worker hiring policy for the County of Los Angeles energy efficiency work. And so it became part, not just of the policy, but also the contract specification. So when a contract for energy efficiency went out to bid, it also had this contract specification that outlined the local worker hiring goals, but also it listed every single member of that advisory committee as a resource for outreach, a resource for supportive services, a resource for recent graduates from the MC3 program. And also we incorporated our union partners by making sure that everyone understood how the apprenticeship programs work, the dispatch process, and also PLAs. And so that was one of the ways in which we brought everybody to the table, identified roles where everyone can actually have a role in helping individuals navigate the pathway, but most importantly, being able to work together for retention. Because one thing in bringing people into a pathway, the greatest challenge is retention. And so that's what we did. That was the approach we took in Los Angeles. And we did something very similar for the business community. So we brought in all the business and trade organizations that are reflective, not just of industry, but also of race and gender. So we had a lot of diverse business organizations as part of our roundtable, also giving us feedback. And that's how we created the E-Contractor Academy. by being able to work in collaboration with all organizations that represent this population.
Thanks, Veronica and Camille. So now I have a question for the whole group, but I would love to hear from Adam first, if you don't mind. Adam, I'm wondering, or one of our attendees is wondering, how states really encourage these ratepayer-funded training programs, or how states can encourage these ratepayer-funded training programs where it might be difficult to show that they, or whether or not they provide a net benefit to ratepayers. I know you worked really closely with Eversource and National Grid to get yours up and going, and you did mention earlier kind of state policy as a driver for those utilities' interest in joining forces with you. Could you just speak to some of those issues? Or maybe what advice might you give other states?
Sure. So anywhere where there is an energy efficiency fund that is administered either through the utilities or by some third-party entity, as other panelists mentioned, there's money that's being collected with the intention of making buildings more energy efficient. And sort of just getting back to the original point, you can invest in a lot of technology, and there are some things that will passively, yield savings. Like if you swap out, an incandescent light bulb for an LED, if the run hours are the same, you will get savings. I think it's where a lot of these more sophisticated energy conservation measures and more, operationally driven savings, you really need to make sure that people know how to actually use that equipment. And there are a number of studies that were done to back up, the savings that were accrued from having a trained building operator, and that's in fact how our utilities are claiming these savings to the Department of Public Utilities. This is also not the first time I've seen this, a utility-funded energy efficiency training program. So I used to work down in the DC area, and both Baltimore Gas and Electric and Pepco offered $1,000 rebates for energy conservation training, whether it's BOC or, certified energy manager or otherwise. But I think, if you look into any of the white papers that have been written on these subjects or any of the research that's been done on it, they can prove that, someone who is trained to look for and identify very specific operational issues like simultaneous heating and cooling, or faulty sensors or actuators within their building management systems. If the person knows what they're looking for and understands why they should be, addressing those concerns as they come up, it's fairly, logical to follow that you will get savings out of it. Proving it out, they've done different studies in different parts of the country because the way that buildings operate and the opportunities for, more active management are different in different parts of the country, but those studies do exist. And if you follow up with me, I'd be happy to dig up the ones that we used, as well as any other relevant research that's been done into this topic.
Thanks, Adam. Similarly, Camille, I'm wondering if you could just speak to the collaboration between the City of New Orleans and your local utility. It seems like you coordinate quite closely on so many programs, whether direct incentives for customers or contractor-targeted efforts. How did that kind of close partnership come to be, and how do you go about identifying your priorities together?
So the City of New Orleans is in a really unique position in that we are one of the only, Entergy New Orleans is one of the only utilities that is regulated by a city council. So Entergy New Orleans operates only within the boundaries of the City of New Orleans, and so we don't have a PSC. So all the regulations come from our city council. So we have a unique level of power in order to dictate how we would like to see energy efficiency programs rolled out. And so we've had some really strong advocates on the city council in the past 5 or 8 years that helped us to really push the envelope on energy efficiency goals for the utilities incentive programs. And so the utility is essentially accountable to the city council for achieving those goals. And so there are, a lot of ongoing conversations as well as partnerships. There office is literally right next to our building, and so we can walk over there at any point and have a conversation with them about the energy efficiency programs, whether it's communications or training or programs or anything having to do with the advancing the goals and metrics. And so I think I would say that, but I would also go back to your previous question that Adam was answering. You know, we have another unique situation in that the state of Louisiana is extremely poor, and we have a budget crisis which has caused the state to slash a lot of the college and community college funding. So some of the training opportunities that could be through the community colleges on the technical side and vocational trainings, those are probably not going to be growing. And so we are going to need to diversify and look at different ways to develop an energy efficiency pipeline. And I think one of the ways that entities have proven to do that well locally is just what I was referring to with Aptim and the Energy Smart model, is helping to develop almost an business incubator cycle. So help, and Veronica also alluded to some of these things in her presentation, helping a business understand how to be a business, and so that they can grow and create those jobs within those businesses. I think those are the kinds of things that can make those jobs long term. And as I mentioned, being able to create jobs that don't require college degrees, that can't be outsourced, those are the types of things that can make our capital and our politicians sit up and pay attention to.
Thanks, Camille. The next question is for Veronica. We have a participant who asked, given the difficulty of getting minority men and women certified in the Home Energy Performance certification or the North American Board of Certified Energy Practitioners standard, how have you handled this?
You know, we have, because we're bringing in these small minority and women-owned companies, a lot of them don't know what the opportunities are, and even what it entails to get one of those certifications. And so what we do in our eContractor Academy is that we bring in speakers that speak in depth about all the certifications. And we also do a lot of cross-referral with our utilities, and highlight some of the training programs and certifications that are available through their workforce education and training, and also through the community colleges. And so we've been more of a conduit of creating awareness and providing them support. We actually sit down and do a lot of one-on-one technical assistance with our contractors in order to complete applications. A lot of our contractors, they have performed a lot of work, but they don't know how to communicate it. They don't understand how to complete a statement of qualifications or a pre-qualification application that would allow them to qualify, not just to bid, but also to qualify for certain types of training. And so that's what we have done with our program.
Thanks, Veronica. Let's see, I'm just skimming through the other questions. This one is for Adam. Could you share the enabling legislation that mandated utilities to provide funding for workforce development, or was it the one that you referenced on your first slide?
Yeah, so I've been kind of shoehorning workforce development into the enabling legislation that creates the energy efficiency funds, arguing that, incentivizing training, can be proven to be just as cost effective and just as much of a savings driver as investing in widgets, because a lot of it is, it's all based on research as to, what is the potential to save from, say, a smart thermostat or building controls. It's all based on, a best estimate. So if you, take the same logic and apply it to training, it's just another energy conservation measure in my mind.
Thanks, Adam. Another question that I will give a few thoughts on and then toss it to the group as well. Our city workforce development initiatives, most often led by sustainability offices or by economic development agencies or both. That's a question we also grappled with kind of going into this project. Most of the efforts that we came across were led by city sustainability offices. But I'll note that through a conversation with the National Association of Workforce Boards, which represents, or it's the Association for Workforce Boards that are coordinated both at the local level, at the state level, and on a regional basis. We found that most of these workforce boards already work in the manufacturing and construction sectors, not necessarily with energy efficiency, but I think it's interesting to point out that those two sectors encompass the majority of energy efficiency jobs, if you think back to the pie chart that we showed at the beginning of this webinar. So I do think there is more opportunity for workforce development boards to work on energy efficiency, and I think there's a natural fit, but I think there's maybe a disconnect between sustainability offices and workforce development boards, or opportunity for more close coordination. Adam, Camille, or Veronica, do you have any thoughts on that question?
I would say in Los Angeles, the Southern California Regional Energy Network program, as well as efforts in workforce development, really came out of the Office of Sustainability. At least that's the case in LA. But you know, in regards to all the WIBs, or the Workforce Investment Boards here in Los Angeles, because we have a number of them, the construction sector is definitely a prominent one. It's a growth sector here in our region, and a lot of those organizations are set up to support individuals that want to begin a career in construction. And again, you know, the way we approach construction, you know, and energy, the training itself, you know, if we provide a pathway for people to go into, you know, HVAC and electrical, then obviously those are energy efficiency, you know, related career tracks within the construction sector.
Thanks, Veronica. Well, unless Adam or Camille have any other thoughts on that topic, we might go ahead and wrap up. Thank you so much to everyone who joined us, and to everyone who hung out for the full hour. We're really excited to have this report out, but we're hoping to hear from you as to what other questions you might have, what you would hope for out of future research on this topic, which we're still kind of scoping on an ongoing basis. I have the email addresses here of all of the presenters. Please feel free to reach out to them if you have more questions, or if you posed one that we didn't get a chance to discuss. Before I hand it over to Maxine to close out the webinar, I'll just also mention that ACEEE's Summer Study Conference is coming up in just a couple weeks in Asilomar, California, and I'll be giving a presentation on this report as well, a bit of a longer presentation. So if any of you guys will be there, I hope to see you there. And thanks again to Camille, Adam, and Veronica for joining us. Now I'll hand it over to Maxine.
All right, thank you again, everybody, for joining us in today's webinar. Within the next day, we'll send a link to the recording. You'll be able to find it on ACEEE's YouTube page. The reports through the local government lens, developing the energy efficiency workforce. You can find that on ACEEE's website at www.aceeee.org/publications. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day.